We start Unit 7 by going over factoring our polynomials. So in Unit 6, we talked about multiplying, dividing, adding, and subtracting polynomials. Now we're going to factor them, so we got to break them down to all the terms that will multiply into a polynomial. So let's do this vocabulary. Factoring is the process of rewriting a polynomial as a product of two or more polynomials, called factors. A factor is any constant or variable that, when multiplied, form a product. List the factors of each of the following. Okay, so if we break up 32 into all the things it can divide into, so what can 32 divide into? 1 times 32, we can go 4 times 8. These are all the factors. Oh, no, there's one more. 2 times 16. And these are just the positive factors, right? We could list these same numbers as negatives also to get positive 32. Negative 9, we can go 1 times negative 9. We can go negative 1 times positive 9. And we could go negative 3 times 3. What would give us 3x? Now I can only think of one thing. It's just 3 times x. I guess you could include 1 in there too. And then what would give us x squared? It's just x times x. So those are the factors of this term. These are the factors of this term. These are all the factors of this term, and so on. The greatest common factor, or GCF, of a polynomial is the greatest monomial that divides into each term evenly. Greatest common factor is the greatest monomial that divides into each term evenly. Determine the GCF for the polynomial given at the right by completing A through C. Okay, write each term in expanded form. So let's just write each of these in expanded form. We have 3 times x times x. These factors make up this term. And for this one, we have 2 times 3 times x. Okay, so we're done with A. And for B, highlight or circle the greatest common factors of the two terms. So what's the greatest factor of this one? Yep, it's which terms do they have in common, basically? They both have a 3 in common, right? And they both have an x in common. So we've done part B. What is the GCF of this polynomial? Well, if you answer 3x, then you're correct. Okay, because 3 is the largest number that will multiply into either term. 3 is the largest number that will multiply into either term. And then x is the variable that they have in common. They both have at least one x. Okay, use these steps to determine the GCF of the polynomial in the box at the left. Okay, so for determining GCF, we can look at the coefficients. What is the largest number that divides evenly into each term? And then we could also look at the variables to see, is there a common variable in each term? So let's pull out the GCF of this one. What is the largest number that will multiply into this binomial? Okay, we can use a 12. 12 is the biggest. And then they both have what variable in common? They both have at least one x. Okay, so 12 is the GCF of these two terms. And for 1, 2, 3, and 4, yeah, they just want you to identify the GCF again. So what's the largest number that will multiply into 45x squared plus 9x? Largest number is 9. And then what variable do they have in common? Just 9x. okay? So I leave it up to you to do these other 3 on your own. I think if you were in class on Friday, you probably have a pretty good idea. And let's just continue on the back page, the back side of the page. A polynomial with a GCF can be factored by taking out the greatest common factor. Would that be the best word though? I'm not sure. Let me do the light dance. Okay. Sorry, back to the vocab. A polynomial with a GCF can be factored by dividing out the greatest common factor. It's probably a better word, dividing it out. So we determine the GCF. Write the GCF on the left side of the graphic organizer or a set of parentheses. Okay, let me just go ahead and do that right now then. What's the GCF of 15x squared and 5x? Well, 5 is the biggest number and they share an x in common. Okay, so I've done this step and I've done this step. And for here, oh, okay, we have to divide each term by the GCF. So this term right here divided by the GCF gives us 3x. And this term divided by the GCF gives us 1. Okay, so what do they want us to do right here? Okay, so we pull out the GCF and 5x times what gives us 15x squared? It should be 3x, just like we have above. And then 5x times what gives us 5x? 5x times 1, so it's going to be plus 1. All right, this is what we normally have to do when we factor out a GCF, just like this. We pull out the GCF, and then we divide each term by the GCF to get whatever numbers go inside the parentheses. Okay, so you pull out that GCF, and we figure out what we have to multiply it by to get the original polynomial. So let's just try another example instead of me just talking about it. Let's just look at it. So for 5 and 6, use the graphic organizers to factor the polynomials. Okay, we got to use this graphic organizer again. We don't normally use this, but let's just go through it again. Let's pull out our GCF. So what's the largest number that would multiply into 12x or 32x squared? Not 12, that won't work. 4 will work, yep. 4 is the highest then. And they have an x in common. Okay, so this is the GCF right here. And now we can divide 32x squared by 4x to get the number inside the parentheses. All right, or we could also think of it as 4x times what would give us 32x squared. So it's going to be 8x, and then 4x times what would give us 12x? That would be 3. Okay, and to fill out this graphic organizer, the GCF was 4x. The terms we were looking at was 32x squared. This is the original polynomial. And we had a 12x. So 32x squared divided by 4x was 8x up top. 12x divided by 4x was 3. Okay, and see if you could just fill out the same graphic organizer the same way for number 6. And now looking at number 7 and number 8, it's the same kind of question, we're just not using the graphic organizer. So for 7 and 8, use parentheses to factor the polynomials, then check your answer by applying the distributive property. Okay, we're going to check our answer by doing the opposite. Remember that factoring is just the opposite of distributing. So what's our GCF right here? we could say that 6 is the highest number, so it's going to be 6, and they have an x in common. Negative 6x divided by 6x is just negative 1. And then we have 12x squared divided by 6x is positive 2x. Okay, so this is our final answer here. So let's check it. Let's check it by distributing. 6x times negative 1 gives us negative 6x. 6x times 2x gives us positive 12x squared, okay, which is the same number as we started with. Okay, so this is just how we check it. We check it by distributing. And I'll leave it to you to do these last few questions here. And then let's just look at the last page. Use your knowledge of the greatest common factor to answer questions 1 and 2. What is the greatest common factor of 6x squared minus 3x plus 18? And 3 is the largest number. And yep, they don't all share a variable in common. They don't all share a variable because 18 is just a constant. So 3 is the only number that they have in common with no variable. Okay. Which of the following polynomials cannot be factored by factoring out a GCF? Okay, so in other words, which one of these doesn't have a greatest common factor? Okay, this one has a greatest common factor of 9. This one has a greatest common factor of 3. This one has a GCF of 2. And this one doesn't have a GCF, okay? Because there's no number besides 1. There's no number that will multiply into 3, 12, and 14. The only number is 1. So our answer is D. D doesn't have a GCF. Okay, factor each polynomial. We did this on the previous sheet. So let's pull out our GCF here. Looks like all we can use is 2. Yeah, 2 is the largest number. And 2 times what gives us 16x squared? That would be 8x squared minus 2 times 11x would give us 22x. Okay, so let me just write that down here. Well, you know what? I missed the x right here, so let me cross that out. I'm sorry about that. Shouldn't have done this in pen. Okay, so 2 is the largest number, but they do share an x in common. Excuse me, I thought something looked a little funny there. Okay, 2x times 8x gives us 16x squared, and 2x times negative 11 gives us negative 22x. Okay, so let me write that over here. 8x minus 11. Sorry about that. And let me just do one more with you. What's the largest number that will go into 10 and 25? That would be 5. And they both have an r in common. Okay, so that's our GCF. Negative 10r squared divided by 5r will be negative 2. R, and this will be positive 5. Okay, so our GCF was 5R times the quantity, negative 2R plus 5. Okay, so practice pulling out a GCF and then dividing the rest of it. And yes, bring me any other extra questions you have to class, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, Ham class.